name is Tony Busby. Welcome to the 75th floor of Chase Tower, downtown Houston. I'm here with Crystal Del Toro, my colleague, and of course, Dr. Hillary Cotham. You know, these kind of matters typically can be resolved without all this. As an example, I recently represented a very high-level executive from a Fortune 500 company who had come across some very disturbing information, and he personally raised it with the CEO of the company. He raised it several times, and nothing was done about it. Instead, what he was told was consider an exit strategy. So he came here to Houston, to the Chase Tower. I then raised that issue with the company. And then the general counsel of that company got on a plane and came here to visit with me. And after several meetings with myself, my client, that executive, and the general counsel and his team, the issue was appropriately resolved. The issue was addressed. The executive was able to make an appropriate exit, and everything was fine, and it never entered the public sphere. It didn't happen like that here, and that's what we tried to get to happen here. This was not a situation that when Dr. Cotham raised these issues with the management of the Spurs, she didn't run to the press. She didn't run off and file a lawsuit. She instead tried to handle things in a way that she felt was appropriate, in a way that would bring some real change in the Spurs organization. Unfortunately, that didn't work out that way. Before we get started, let me make it clear that we understand that there are laws in the state of Texas and, of course, HIPAA laws that protect doctor-patient confidentiality. The laws are very clear on that. The laws are very aggressive on that, as they should be. We have consulted the licensing board to make sure that we don't run afoul of those laws and of those requirements. We've consulted lawyers who specifically practice in these areas to make sure that Dr. Cotham doesn't say anything that is beyond what she's able to disclose. And I can tell you, and she'll tell you herself, she takes those laws and her ethical responsibilities very, very seriously. You know, she's got 5 degrees, she told me this morning. She's obviously very well credentialed, very well respected, and she wants to make sure that she does everything correctly. We've even been threatened. Some of you may have seen the letter that was sent to me yesterday from some lawyers from California, threatening me personally and threatening Dr. Cotham with disclosing anything that may have happened in these sessions. And you know, one of the things, there is no Hippocratic oath in the law practice, but I've always believed that as a lawyer, the first thing you should do is do no harm to your client. When somebody sends me a letter threatening me that's baseless and silly, like the letter that I received yesterday, as I told them, perhaps they should follow the Hippocratic oath, because threatening me or threatening Dr. Cotham is probably not the appropriate way to go about doing what hopefully you're trying to do and advance your client's interests. So, Dr. Cotham won't, can't, and would not disclose what was said during any psychological session between herself and Joshua Primo. She can only disclose what is actionable conduct. That is, conduct that might be considered and probably would be considered criminal under Texas law and actionable in civil law. We do not believe, and I don't think anybody would believe, that what we're going to describe to you would be considered nonverbal communication. One of the questions I asked the lawyer for Mr. Primo, this lawyer from California, is what is being communicated when a patient exposes himself to his psychologist? It's a question maybe they can answer for you. You should know that Dr. Cotham was contracted with the Spurs in April of 2021. Correct me on any of my facts that are wrong. She was hired as a consultant. She is in the field of clinical psychology. She has a PhD. She takes a comprehensive approach. She can help, of course, with performance issues. She also takes a comprehensive approach on mental health, and her range of expertise is quite broad, but she was hired to assist the players not only in enhancing performance, but also just dealing with the day-to-day issues that they have to deal with as professional sports players. She was on staff, and I think she'll tell you, to help the players be better players and better people. And I got to tell you, it was a dream job for her. And when you think about the field of clinical psychology, for someone of her background, she was also a college athlete. This was the dream job for her. It was, I would call it, the top of the mark for someone in her field of clinical sports psychology and performance enhancement. It was almost the very first session that she had with Joshua Primo where he exposed his penis to her. That occurred in late December of 2021. She immediately raised that issue with the general manager of the Spurs organization in January 2022. It took a long time for her to get a meeting with him. He postponed the meeting multiple times. From her point of view, it seemed to be that they weren't taking it seriously or it didn't matter to them. But she finally got a face-to-face with the general manager and told him what had happened, and wanted something to be done about it. Instead of something being done about it, what instead happened was they continued to call upon her to have sessions with Mr. Primo and, of course, the other athletes. She did not want to lose this job. She was hoping that this conduct was somehow outside of the norm of Mr. Primo. She was hoping it was a one-time thing, if you will, but unfortunately the conduct continued to occur and, in fact, escalated. She ultimately, without going into the details, and there's a lot of detail in the petition that was filed this morning in Bexar County, but without going into it here, ultimately she found ways to not have sessions with Mr. Primo and to avoid him. What I want to focus on this morning is the way in which the Spurs organization responded to her reports. As I've already said, the general manager did his best to avoid a meeting with her, but when he did have a meeting with her, he assured her that there would be an investigation, that there would be a written report. He called it a write-up. He assured her that Primo would be, the issue would be addressed with him, that he would be counseled, the conduct specifically would be addressed, and that there would be consequences. None of that occurred. In fact, his conduct wasn't restricted in any way. Instead, what happened was Dr. Cotham's activities were restricted. At one point, she was told, you can just work from home. At another point, she was told, you don't need to come to the facilities anymore. Just work from home. And it's okay if you don't come to the facilities. In multiple meetings with the assistant general counsel and the head of human resources for the Spurs organization, at one point they told her, which is ridiculous on its face, but they told her they wanted to do what they called a facilitated discussion with Dr. Cotham and Joshua Primo so they could figure out what it was that was compelling him to expose himself to her. They told her that they intended to make changes, repeated. Almost every meeting they told her that there's going to be something done. Nothing was done, of course. In one of the meetings, she had great respect for Coach Popovich. I think a lot of people see him as a progressive coach, somebody who speaks out on social issues, somebody who talks about culture. She insisted that he be aware of what was going on. She was told that he was aware about what was going on. Now, we can't stand here on the 75th floor of Chase and tell you that was the truth. We don't know at that point in time, and I'm talking about in June when they told her that. June of this year, they told her Coach Pop is aware, Coach Pop knows. I think we may have concluded here that at that point in time she was being lied to. Ultimately, what they told Dr. Cotham, instead of doing something with the player, what they did instead was tell her to, quote, sit it out, is what they told her. And then in July, when the team went to Las Vegas for some events for the 2022 summer season, they told her she didn't need to attend, she didn't need to travel with the team, although typically she would have. And then ultimately she was told, and I think this is kind of the most ridiculous thing she was told. They told her that they, that is the administration of the Spurs, and the team itself had lost trust in her. And as she sat at home, apparently, and this is from reports because we had no involvement in any of this, but apparently as she sat at home, Mr. Primo, it's been reported, did it again in Vegas. Her contract came up for renewal in August. They chose not to renew her contract. And I guess nothing ever would have been done about this. We had been, by this point, she had contacted this office, had contacted the lawyers for not only Mr. Primo, but also the Spurs organization. We had had multiple conversations about meetings that we were going to have. We were resolved again to keep this quiet, not to put this into the public sphere, and try to see if we could figure out a way to put changes in place so this type of thing wouldn't happen again, and also make sure that there was never any suggestion that she left because of anything she did. But apparently, more than a week ago in Minnesota, the conduct occurred again. And it was that conduct, I think, that precipitated Mr. Primo being released from the team. And so at that point, after more than 10 months of knowing about this conduct, after the general manager knowing about it, the general counsel, the deputy general counsel, and the head of HR, after 10 months, they finally released Joshua Primo. And I guess to add insult to injury, the statements, the public statements that the Spurs made, and the statement made by Mr. Primo are complete farces, a complete whitewash, and do not reflect actually what happened here. At the Spurs organization, they like to say that this is bigger than basketball, is what they say. They say their tenets are respect, care, and integrity. You'll see that on their website. You'll see that in some of their public statements. They say it's respect, care, and integrity, and of course, as you can see, they failed on all counts. We filed suit this morning against the San Antonio Spurs organization. We filed that case in San Antonio and Bexar County. We also filed suit against Mr. Primo himself. Josh Primo's conduct is obviously well outside the bounds of what is normal or is acceptable. His conduct shocks the conscience. I would also say that the Spurs' conduct and the way they handled this matter was egregious and absolutely unreasonable. We've also had contact, and the truth is they reached out to us once this story broke. We've had contact with the authorities of Bexar County and San Antonio. There will be a criminal complaint filed for multiple counts of indecent exposure against Mr. Primo, and we expect the authorities to prosecute. We expect them to prosecute. To the extent she is able to as a licensed professional, Dr. Cotham will participate in those proceedings. This came public because someone in the Spurs leaked the reasons for Josh Primo's departure, because we never said a word. In fact, this is the first time we've said anything about his conduct. To resolve this matter is going to require some change. There's going to have to be some protocols put in place at the San Antonio Spurs organization for reporting and dealing with, in an appropriate way, this type of behavior. Organizations can no longer choose what they call their assets, that is, players like Mr. Primo, over people. Hiding conduct like this isn't acceptable. Sweeping conduct like this under the rug won't be tolerated. Dr. Cotham wants to be a catalyst for the change that is needed in professional sports. She has had an outpouring of support since this story became public. She tried to do things the right way. The Spurs, of course, took a different approach. And despite the expected criticism that we expect to happen, and it happens in every one of these types of cases, criticism from fans and naysayers and what I like to call, these tough guys behind their keyboards in their basements, she knows that coming out and speaking out for change and standing up is the right thing to do. She wants to be a part of that change. No one is more qualified than her to help make that change. I want to say this too. I'm calling upon anyone who has been a victim of Joshua Primo to contact us. We want to hear from you. Also, anyone who has information that might assist us, we want to hear from you. We intend, as we have done in the past, to do a very detailed deep dive on Mr. Primo and the Spurs organization. And we're going to make sure that everything that's been previously swept under the rug is made public. Now, it's a great honor for me to introduce to you Dr. Hillary Cotham. She has a statement she would like to make. I will come back after she's made her statement with some closing remarks, and then we'll take a few questions. Doctor?
I have an obligation under Texas state law and HIPAA, which I take very seriously, and I will not violate. I am disheartened to be standing here sharing the events of my story, but I'm also very humbled and honored to have the place to share words that others may have not been able to. I'm a clinical sports psychologist. I'm a mother of 4 wonderful daughters. I'm a woman, and I am a victim. I am many things, but I'm not alone in the fight to do the right thing. The right thing is saying, no, this is not okay, to hold people accountable, to make systemic change, and to protect those that suffer in silence. The right thing is also saying, I'm sorry. I have failed you, and we need to do better. My passion is to help others learn how to thrive in their world and to help organizations develop a culture of care. The organization I worked for has failed me. And in turn, I failed those around me when I wanted to make change. I spoke up, I asked for help, I gave options. My voice and my feelings, my actionable items were silenced. Due to their inaction and protection of their assets, other individuals were impacted, and for that, I am truly sorry. I ask for everyone listening to do not jump to harsh criticism or conclusions. This is a sensitive matter, and these are humans who are impacted. We cannot assume, but we can take action. It took the Spurs 10 months to do the right thing. That's too long. My hope is that all who hear can learn from this. I hope through this I can be an agent for change. It's never too late for us to change and to be better. Thank you.
The case we have filed, and of course we will distribute it for you, seeks justice for Dr. Cotham. Her job was taken from her through no fault of her own, but this case is bigger than that. As you heard, she wants change to be made. Formalized protocols to address these types of issues. Players are obviously very important to an organization like the San Antonio Spurs, but they aren't any more important than anyone else. When a report is made, it must be acted upon. There has to be responsibility and accountability, and that's really all we're looking for here. With that, we'll take a few questions. Probably a lot of your questions will be answered if you get your hands on that petition, but I'll take a few questions either from myself or the doctor, depending on what you want to ask.
I just want to clarify, Tom Osborne with the San Antonio Express, and I think the answer is here in the lawsuits you said, but the general manager in question is Brian Wright.
Correct.
Not Chief Executive Officer or CEO.
Correct.
Have you heard from any other women about this case?
I have not. I expect I will. Anybody else?
There was allegedly other conduct by Primo in Minnesota, Vegas are those other women who are expecting to come forward, or what was it?
I'm hoping they come forward.
Tony, you said that a criminal complaint would be filed. Where would that be filed at? Will it be multiple places or just Bear County?
I know for sure Bear County.
And you've coordinated with the district attorney in Bear County on this?
We're talking to them, yes, now.
What are you guys seeking in the lawsuit between the Spurs and Primo?
I think we made it pretty clear. It's not about money, obviously. This is about putting in place formalized protocols that when a professional, and it doesn't have any, here you have, of anyone who could come forward and say, look, this happened, we need to address this is a problem, there's something clearly wrong here. I mean, there's no one more qualified and credentialed to come forward and say that. And this is the way they treated her. Imagine somebody who doesn't have a PhD, somebody who's not credentialed, somebody who was not, at the top of her field. This needs to change, and it needs to change now.
What evidence do you have that something happened in Minnesota and in Vegas?
Just reports that we received from the team. I mean, the truth is, all of this came about, all of this became public because of people from the Spurs.
Hillary, you kind of touched on this, but how disappointing is it that, what you love and the career that you worked so hard for, in this instance, has been taken away from you?
Yeah, I was honored and grateful to even have the opportunity to be embedded in a team. It's very rare to have someone that has the chance to build something with an organization, and I chose to build something with people that I trusted. And I feel like, more importantly, I've lost the impact to help other individuals in that organization. It was taken away from them, and I lost my job, it's really hard.
After the initial saying so in January, what was the last contact you guys had after Minneapolis, after something happened there that resulted in the release of Primo? What was the last contact you guys had with the Spurs?
The letter that we received yesterday threatening us from Primo's counsel, which I thought was kind of funny, to be honest. But we had a meeting, I think, scheduled for November 10th we had a meeting scheduled for November 10th with lawyers for both Primo and the Spurs. And then, of course, Primo was released, and somebody from the Spurs leaked this issue to the press, and then we started getting calls, and then so here we are.
Have the Spurs offered any sort of apology for anything that has happened thus far?
No, but we surely hope they will.
Hillary, after nothing happening with him for so long, what were your feelings whenever he was finally released?
Mixed emotions. I mean, I'm glad that action has been had. I can't speak to what the action or the release was that they chose to let him go. Yeah, there's anger, there's sadness, there's confusion, but I can't speak to why they let him go.
That's all we got, guys.
Did
We're
the
out.
alleged incident in Minnesota take place at the Four Seasons Hotel last week?
That's what we're told, but we're getting that information from you. So we don't know. Thank you, guys. Lawsuit is right there if you want a copy of it.